So now we're up to the Makat Tzvadeya. Pharoah calls Moshe Rabbeinu and he tells him, please beg Hashem to remove the frogs from within Klal Yisrael. So it comes a very interesting question that Hachaim is going to ask now. Why did Pharoah, some Makas come to Moshe Rabbeinu, some Makas Moshe Rabbeinu came to Pharoah, some Makas Moshe Rabbeinu said it in a language of, begging Moshe Rabbeinu to ask Hashem to remove it. Other languages were less, aggressive. What's the difference? What happened by every Makkah that changed Pharoah's approach when he asked Moshe to daven for him? And the Hachaim is going to be medayik of some very interesting nuances in every Makkah that Pharoah's approach was different. So Tzarech Ladas, we're up to Perek Ches Pasuk Dalet. Lama Leipana Uba El Beisav Yimakazu. Why did Pharoah not come to Moshe Rabbeinu in this Makkah? K'Moshe Asa b'Makas Dam. By Makas Dam, right? He didn't ask Moshe Rabbeinu to daven to Hashem. Why? Because there the simple answer is because they were also able to make the water into blood. So over here, the question is, what changed in the Makas Tzvadeya that Pharoah sort of started to panic, where in Makas Dam he didn't? The truth is, if you look at Pharoah's own words, you'll see what exactly motivated him to come to Moshe Rabbeinu. And if you look at every nuance in every Makkah, you'll see how every Makkah affected Pharoah in a different way. And this is the key that our Hachaim points out, that the only time Pharoah really was nervous and really was motivated is only when he thought that his life was in danger. If he didn't think his life was in danger, even if he was very discomforted, he was in a very, uncomfortable position, it didn't really bother him. It was only when he thought that he may die, that's when he started to panic. Now it's true, we have to point out that Hashem, hardened his heart and made it difficult for him. But even still, when Pharoah thought that he was going to die, right, there's no great motivator like the potential of dying, right? Death is the greatest motivator. So now the Hachaim is going to go through each one quickly, and we're going to see some very interesting insights. So again, just to make sure we have it clear, the Hachaim is going to explain how every Makkah's result motivated Pharoah in a different way in his approach to ask Moshe Rabbeinu to daven to Hashem. Rishoina, the first Makkah is Makas Dam. In Makas Dam, there was no sakana, there was no real threat to his life. It's true that he had no water, but there was ways for him to get water. He was able to find water by digging outside of certain areas. They were able to buy water from Jews. One of the ways Klal Yisrael became wealthy was that only they were able to sell water to the Egyptians. If the Egyptians would go into the house and take water by force, it would turn to blood. The only way that the water would remain water was if they paid for it. Understand? And therefore, so ultimately, while Pharoah was not happy with it, and it caused him tremendous, angst, his life was not threatened. So therefore, if his life was not threatened, he wasn't really motivated. At a point, he said, Moshe Rabbeinu, do me a favor, daven to get rid of this. But it wasn't like, I'll do whatever you need me to do. Right. He was not affected by it. Makas Tzvadeya, however, there was tremendous noise from the frogs. And that, even though you may not have death, right, it's just like death, right? Anybody who has a toothache, a terrible toothache, knows that one of the worst pains is a tooth pain, because that it's unbearable. So here too, the tremendous noise that the frogs made it unbearable. They couldn't sleep, they couldn't eat, they couldn't have solitude, nothing. In addition, the frogs actually entered into the insides of the Mitzrayim. So imagine the Mitzrayim now had frogs inside of them. It's not a very comfortable thing at all. Within you and your people, the tzvardim go in. It caused great emotional distress. In such a case, a guy who thinks that he has a frog in his stomach that's alive, he says, he starts to get nervous about his life. That's why Paro said to Moshe a very interesting lashon. Remove the tzvardim from within me. Pirush, not within me in my area, within me literally, said Paro, from inside me. That's why when it came to tzvardeya, Paro was basically begging Moshe Rabbeinu to ask Hashem to remove the makkah. Makkah's kinim. So now we go to Makkah's kinim. Even though ki gagam sheitztar, it was very uncomfortable, right? There was very discomfort. There was no danger of dying, right? A frog entering a person's stomach, it could eat its insides, it could damage the liver, the heart, the organs. Lice is very uncomfortable, but the person's not going to die from it. And even though Hagam Shiyoda Kihi Etzbel Kimhi, even though Paro clearly recognized that this only could have came from Hashem, it didn't bother him. I could accustom myself, right? In life, fortunately and unfortunately, people can get accustomed to any situation. Right? The only thing they can't get accustomed to is the fear of dying. So lice, okay, it was very difficult, very uncomfortable, but they would have adjusted. And even the Chatumim, the magicians, told Paro, this is not something we could do. And therefore, and even though Paro realized that this only could have come from Hashem, he wasn't in a rush to ask Moshe Rabbeinu to help him. Why? Because the key, he wasn't afraid of dying. Makkah of wild beast, which is the fourth one. So here, the frightening noises and aggressiveness of the animals that Hashem sent, Paro got nervous. Animals running through the streets, lions, bears, tigers, whatever different aggressive animals came, Paro got nervous. The Tekef and immediately Shalach Achreim v'Amar l'chu zivchu. Right? At this Makkah, he was so afraid because this was, a much higher probability of his death. He even told Moshe Rabbeinu, go and to the desert and go bring the sacrifices that you want to. And please beg for me. Now, another interesting point. The Hachaim doesn't say it directly, but as you learn the Hachaim, you see that in all the scenarios, not one time did Paro ask to save his nation. It was always about him, right? It was always, please save me, please remove this from me, please help me, right? So people always ask, how could Hakadosh Baruch Hu be mechazik to leave Paro? He took away his free choice. But if you really look at it, Paro wasn't interested in anything else but himself. If you go through every makkah. And therefore, Hagam, ki shalach v'ra mikne yisov loy mesachot. And even though he sent his messengers, his officers to see, I skipped. Now we move on to the fifth makkah, which is the plague of the animals. Now, plague of the animals had no effect on him. But Sachar said, b'mikne levad. This makkah only affected the animals. So, okay, he wasn't happy that all the animals started to die, right? He wasn't in a rush to ask for the makkah to be terminated. Why? Because he'll live another day. They'll buy animals from the next country. It's not a problem. Hagam, even though Kisholach v'ra mikna yisov v'lo mesachon, he sent his messengers, and he saw, interestingly, that the plague had no effect on Klal Yisrael's animals, which is a clear sign that it was from Hashem. He wasn't motivated. He didn't take any extra, message from this to daven to Hashem. Right? Why? Because his life was not in danger. Shchin was boils. There's no danger to his life. And this, by the way, was part of Hashem's plan, right? To alternate one makkah that he would fear for his life, another makkah that that he wouldn't fear for his life, right? To give him a little bit of a reprieve to re-harden his heart. And that was by design, right? Because if he would have had 2 makkahs in a row that his life was in danger, it would have been over already. But here, Hashem did it specifically. 1 makkah, life was in danger, 1 makkah not. 1 makkah yeah, 2 makkahs no. In order to give him a full sense of security. Makkahs barod, letzad, shirim Hashem yishamayim v'nasan kol esh min shamayim. There was tremendous thundering and explosions and fire from the sky. The Egyptians started to panic, and they thought that Hashem would do to Egypt like he did to Sodom and Amorah. And therefore, he ran and he asked Hashem, he asked Moshe Rabbeinu to daven to Hashem, and it was so great the fear of death that he even said, Hashem is the tzaddik. That's how great his fear of death was. Makas arba, so now Hashem gave him a reprieve. Piv ona ki masha hit in his gash letzat shior years mavos. Right? Sorry. So here too, Paro was motivated to ask for rachamim because he was afraid for his life. Tiksiv v'yosem mi'alai rakas hamavos hazeh. Very interesting language. In this case, Paro realized that whatever food was left, the locust would eat it up. And if the locust ate up all the food, even though they could import food from other countries, it would take time. And without food, you can't live. And therefore, Paro came to the conclusion that if he doesn't remove the locust, then he will die. And he specifically used the language, remove this death upon me. Makas choishes, when it came to the 9th makkah of darkness, Lo ra'inu lo shebikesh mi Moshe lispalel. We do not see anywhere that he asked Moshe Rabbeinu to daven. It could be that he wasn't able to ask because he was stuck. It could be that he wasn't afraid of death. The first 3 days, they just lit torches. And the second 3 days, they were stuck. They weren't moving anywhere. There was no way. And the last makkah, obviously, we know that he already got to the point that everybody was dying and he was afraid that he was going to be next. So he told Moshe Rabbeinu, at this point, it's time to leave.